Thanks everybody for joining. As was described in the various emails and social media posts you received, I'm going to do a brief meditation. We have about an hour, so I'll do a 5-minute meditation, and then we will go to a live Q&A session. I'll answer some of the questions that people posted in the registration, and then if anybody has any questions on the call that come out of the answers that I give, just things that have been burning a hole in your brain, now is the time to ask them. Paul Millard, who is a wonderful online facilitator, he's going to help co-host and facilitate and kind of keep things on track. So we're going to begin with about a 5-minute meditation, and I'll just describe that a little bit. So I think that there's a technique that dovetails really well with both our situation right now around the coronavirus and being largely indoors, many of us, and the fact that we're on this call. And that is a sound meditation or a listening meditation. So just kind of preparing us to listen, to be open and receptive to whatever it is that we're hearing, and also providing some spaciousness of mind. That's what focusing on sound can provide us. So you can just find a posture that you find comfortable. You can have your eyes open or just slightly closed. If your eyes are open, you want to have just a soft gaze, a few feet out in front of you. Just right off the top, start with several deep breaths. Noticing any sensations in the body as you breathe. You might notice wherever the breath feels most predominant. Noticing any changes in the body between the in-breath and the out-breath. Just awakening to our lived experience right here, right now. In the same way that you brought your attention into your body, with the same level of ease, just opening your attention to any sensations of sound. Noticing when sounds are present, when sounds aren't present. If sounds are present, trying to stay with the actual sensation of hearing rather than making up a story about what sound we're hearing or getting lost in thoughts about the sound. Just staying with the direct sensory perception, allowing ourselves to know it. If you find that it's relatively quiet where you are, First off, you can consider yourself lucky. Offer up some gratitude. Also, notice the sounds of silence. What is the lived experience of not hearing? Just noticing any spaciousness in your awareness that came from, rather than turning inward or being lost in thought, that came from the open, receptive attention to sound. And setting an intention to remain with this faculty of sensation, of listening throughout the rest of the call, gradually opening your eyes, reconnecting your visual sensations. Thanks, everybody. So for anybody who joined the call later, I hope that you caught on that we were doing a brief meditation at the top. And now I'm going to go into some Q&A. And I'm going to start with some questions that people posted in the registration. And then we'll do a live Q&A. So Paul, if you just want to talk about like best practices around doing a live Q&A on Zoom, I think that would be helpful for everybody. Putting you on the spot.
You might, I don't know if you want people to introduce themselves first and share any initial thoughts or questions, but that might be a good first way to do it. And then the other way is you can either message me the questions directly or just put them in the chat box at the bottom of the screen and I can help feed them to Travis. And I think what are some topics you want people to focus on? Experiences around the retreat, general ideas around kind of like Buddhism and mindfulness, topics like that.
Yeah, so I'm fairly open to most of the topics. I know that a lot of people are interested in the story of how the retreat, like how I kind of when I found out about coronavirus on the retreat. So I might start with that. And yeah, any topics that people are interested in, really, I'm happy to answer anything. But yeah, let's start with some introductions. If everybody's comfortable, then you can start. And I guess it'll probably be easiest if I call people out rather than having people talk over each other. And just also for the people who joined late, this is a recorded call, so if you don't want to have your video or if you don't want to speak, that's perfectly fine. Just don't speak up and we'll skip over you. So Paul, why don't you start? Introduce yourself. Paul, you're on mute, I think. We lost you.
Yeah, so I am sitting in the sun kind of in Spain right now in the Canary Islands. We're pretty safe, but live in different places with my wife. And my interest in mindfulness and meditation probably started years ago, but with getting fighting a chronic illness probably 5-6 years ago, kind of, I guess, broke the frame for me. And over the past couple of years living in Asia has deepened my interest. And I think Travis and I have engaged in a lot of conversations around both our learning around these topics. So yeah, that's kind of my background and curiosity here.
Thanks. Mom, you want to go next?
Sure. I really started in meditation because of Travis. I went through cancer about 4.5 years ago, and I think that he initially got into it as a form of finding peace with what was going on in our lives. And he eventually, started leading me in meditation and talking to me about it and reading me things. Um, and now I continue meditation on my own. And I find a great sense of peace and direction sometimes on where I think my life would be going and where a better direction it can go and how I can accomplish that. So,
Great, thanks, Mom.
yep.
Kurt,
Morning, Travis,
good morning, Kurt.
and everyone. I'm coming to you from Boulder, Colorado today. I'm a scientist. I know Travis from college, um, and I'm tuned in today because definitely interested in mindfulness, but also very interested in the um, different philosophical and physical explorations that Travis has done at different points over the years, and feel sort of a kinship there. So very curious to hear about the experience, because I think being guided through a meditation has something in common with hearing about someone's journey down the road, physical or metaphysical. So yeah.
Thanks, Kurt. Janice, would you like to introduce yourself? Okay, I think we're going to skip over Janice. Irv?
Hello. Hi, I'm joining from Taiwan right now. Travis and I are friends from Chicago. I started in meditation about 3 or 4 years back, primarily because of Travis. And during that time, I was going through some changes in my personal life and just overall changes in my life, and meditation and mindfulness had definitely helped me deal with a lot of emotions and the relationships that I've had with my family and my friends, and now it's been a continued part of my daily life. And Travis and I, we have many conversations about our practice and things that are going on. So I can only join for a little bit because it is quite late here in Taiwan. But yeah, I'm looking forward to watching the rest when I get back, when I wake up in the morning.
Thanks for joining, Irv. Stuart?
Hello, sorry. I'm Stuart Oken. I'm speaking to you from Ojai, California, where my wife and I escaped from Chicago in February, and we're supposed to go back in a few days, so we may or we may not. We don't know yet, trying to figure that out. I know Travis just a little, from sitting in a insight meditation group in Chicago, which I travel a lot, but when I'm in town, I go to on alternate Monday nights, and I've enjoyed having a small sangha to just be with. It hasn't gone very deep, but it's appealing just to have a place, just to have some people to share consciousness with for a short time. I'm about 7 years into a daily meditation practice. I retired about a year ago. I'm still working a little, but the nature of my life has changed dramatically in the last year, which brings up so many issues of about identity and ego and the ways I grasp to things, and I love my practice. I've been, during this time, I've been meditating or studying for probably 2, 3, or 4 hours a day sometimes now, just because it's just an opportunity to try to go deeper. But at the same time, I find myself challenged in my practice and in my body and heart in ways that I kind of maybe should have anticipated, but didn't anticipate, with the uncertainty and insecurity. Like, it feels in some ways like my practice has taken a huge step backwards during this period, because it's pushing the buttons of all those places that are there and don't really go away, which is what I think I'm discovering, but that require my really, really use of my mindfulness. I mean, I really have to work very hard. And I've also noticed a few times where I've lost it completely. And I was stunned by my own behavior, kind of not violent or mean, but just so triggered in ways that I went, whoa, I thought I could see that coming. And so it's been a very interesting, frightening, confusing time. And, I've been just trying to use it, as much as I can. So, and I've also been to IMS and Spirit Rock about 8 or 9 times between them. And I have 17 days on the calendar for Spirit Rock in July for 2 back-to-back retreats that they allowed you to sign up for. So I hope that'll be possible. But I've never now done more than about 8 days. So I was very interested in knowing what Travis's experience was. And I thought of him often as the February, March went on, because I knew he was there. And I tune in a bit. I mean, I think I've heard a number of the talks that you probably heard there, because on Dharma Seed, a lot of the teachers are posting their talks, and it's really been fascinating. Although there was no talk of the coronavirus on the talks, because I guess, I don't know, you'll tell us when you learn this and all that, but you had some great teachers, and I really just wanted to know how you experienced the retreat. Thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Sorry not to be on video. It's kind of, I don't look that good.
I doubt that, but thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Okay.
I think that's my dad's phone number. Dad, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Charlie Mann. I'm Travis's proud father, and I wanted to listen in today. Just it was quite a 45 days of wonder as we thought about his practice and all the benefits that we were sure he was reaping, and how it was going to change so abruptly. And who could have ever imagined that the change would be as abrupt as it is? So I'm listening today because I always enjoy hearing Trav's stories since he was a young man and a young child, and he's a great storyteller. And I wanted to hear the recap. He's been kind of busy, and look forward to it, Trav. So thank you for including us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dad. Okay, so I think I'll start. I'm gonna highlight my video again, and I'm gonna start with questions that were submitted via the registration page. If as I'm talking, you have any questions come up, you can put those in the chat box to everyone or to Paul, and he can kind of help parse through those. Otherwise, we'll just open up the floor and let people ask their questions as they will. So the first question that we had was, did you have a recurring theme come up during your meditations? So there were several recurring themes. One of them was physical pain. So when you're on retreat, you are alternating between sitting and walking meditation for, oh, Janice, do you want to introduce yourself? I feel like we missed you. You dropped off for a second. Hold on. We're going to go back and we're going to let Janice introduce
Oh,
herself.
no, that's okay. I just said hi in the chat. So,
Okay.
Travis, it's really good to see you.
Thank you so much, Janice. It's good to see you too.
I know.
I didn't want
Travis-
anybody to feel left out.
Oh, no, I'll just briefly talk for a minute then. I know Travis from Chicago. We were in the same Sangha, one of our Sanghas. I'm sure you were in many. I was too. And I've been a long time meditator. It's really my cornerstone. Lucky enough to offer it to many young people and adults in Chicago who live with the challenge of poverty. It's new for me. This is my full third week of isolation in Chicago. I've been on silent retreats before, but this is the scariest silent retreat I've ever been on for the world. Scary for the world. So, Travis, it's really good to see you, and I'm glad to be.
Thank you so much, yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, continuing on. I didn't want anybody to be left out. So, recurring themes: physical pain, alternating between sitting and walking meditation for about 8 hours a day. That's one of the main things that came up for me. I was a little bit aggressive, I think, in my sitting posture right at the start, and also there's beautiful landscape around Spirit Rock, the retreat center where I was at, and I did a lot of hiking, and I also wanted to stay in shape, so I had some resistance bands that I was using for resistance training. And I think I hit it a little bit hard, and I was doing yoga for an hour a day. And all of those things combined, I injured myself. I injured my hamstring. And so sitting with that and learning to meditate, not through, but with the physical pain, was instructive for sure. So one of the things that came up for me was, in terms of how aggressive I was being, just letting go of ideas of what meditation needs to be, and also what exercise needs to be. We kind of get locked into a certain view about how we need to meditate and how we need to exercise in order to be healthy, and just noticing whether or not my motivation or my intention was motivated by a sense of comfort with my existing viewpoint, regardless of whether or not that was serving me at the moment, being afraid to try different things, or whether it was motivated out of self-care. So I really discovered the benefit of always having a loving intention, a caring intention for myself and for others, I realized that even with exercise, something that is so wholesome, something that really benefits a lot of people and that, you know, could be considered almost like medicine to a lot of people, when it's motivated by a sense of hatred for the body, or even just distaste with the current physical form of the body, the exercise tends to be characterized by rushing, overexertion, a lot of tension. And I noticed that as I exercised, if I motivated or if I meditated as I exercised on caring intentions towards my body, that it was much more easeful, that I found it much easier to tap into the stopping point, the kind of natural point where my body was like, okay, you've exercised now, and now we need to stop in order to like preserve our own health and well-being. So that was something that came up for me a lot over the retreat. I guess I'll move on to the next question. What was the most memorable meditation session for me and why? This one's going to be, I think, interesting to a lot of people. One time, so when you're on the meditation retreat, the teachers only come into the hall during specific periods of the day. So in the morning, you'll have a sitting meditation where they offer you instructions that you're supposed to apply yourself to throughout the day. At 2 p.m., we had what was called a Brahma Vihara meditation, which is a meditation that's less focused on mindfulness and more focused on wholesome heart qualities. So loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy or sharing in others' joy, and equanimity or balance and even keeledness of mind. So the teachers would come in for that session, and then at 7:30 p.m. they would come in and give what's called a Dharma talk. They would talk to us about the teachings that the Buddha gave and how those relate to our meditation practice. In between those times, there's what's called practice leaders. So these are people who sit at the front of the hall in the place where the teachers normally sit, and they don't guide the meditation, but they're responsible for ringing the bell at the end of the meditation period. So as you can imagine, it's a very important job because there's a lot of people out there sitting on those cushions thinking, oh my God, when is the bell gonna ring? And so you don't want to miss the time. And so it's very supportive to your practice because you get to look out and see all of the people and realize like all of these people are here in this hall. They're applying themselves in a very dedicated fashion to their practice. And it gives you a lot of energy to sustain your own practice. So a lot of people, a lot of experienced meditators find that some of their most focused, calm, energetic sessions happen during those practice leader times. So this one time I was a practice leader and I was practicing loving kindness meditation. So in loving kindness meditation, we send well wishes out to all beings in the world. You can start with individuals, whether it's yourself or a benefactor or a dear friend, and you just wish well on them. You want them to be happy, you want them to be safe, you want them to be physically well, you want their mind to be at ease. And so you generate those feelings of loving kindness, sometimes through the use of phrases, and then you send them out to the world. So I'm sitting here and I'm doing that meditation. It's going along. I wouldn't say that it was necessarily a groundbreaking session, but something that's relevant to this story that you should know about Spirit Rock is that there's a significant amount of insect life around Spirit Rock. And I've actually, in the meditation hall before, while I was being mindful of the body, I felt something skitter across my neck and reached back and I found a tick. So that was at a different retreat that I was on at Spirit Rock. And ever since then, when I'm in the meditation hall and I'm sitting meditating, sometimes I'll feel my nerves kind of go off, which is a super interesting sensation because almost never is there anything there. And so you kind of see how that experience conditions future experiences of the body. I felt something on my arm and I was like, oh man, is there a tick on me? There were only 10 minutes left in the session. I looked down at my arm and there was a little tiny ant that was crawling through my hairs on my arm like a jungle gym. And I thought, oh, geez, there's 10 minutes left in this meditation. I don't want to flick this ant off and potentially kill it because we take a vow of non-harming for all sentient beings on the planet. And I thought, if I get up, I'm going to disrupt the meditation. What if I just brought my mindfulness into the body and paid attention to the sensations rather than being lost in thoughts about, you know, a bug's crawling on me and I have to get it off? And what if I sent loving kindness to my new ant friend? And so for the final 10 minutes of the sit, I sat there and the ant crawled around on me and the sensations were wild. There was very little aversion because normally, like most people, when there's a bug on me, I want it off. There's a lot of aversion to that sensory experience. But this time it was completely different. It was filled with loving kindness towards the ant, and it was wonderful. Afterwards, I wanted to go to yoga, and I couldn't find the ant anymore. I didn't know where it had crawled off to, and I didn't want to lay down on the mat and crush it. So I went to one of our teachers and I said, can you please help me? I think I have an ant on me somewhere and I need you to look and find it. We never found my ant friend. I hope that they're doing well, but yeah, that was probably the most memorable meditation experience I had, just because it was so contrasting with my normal experience of having a bug on me. And it kind of showed the power of the mind when it rests in a caring intention, and also just focuses on the bare sensation or sensory information that's coming into the body, rather than getting lost in stories in the mind about how things are supposed to be. Okay, the last question that we had from the registration was, yeah, is there a question related to that?
Travis, I was going to say, maybe even stepping back, I think I'd be curious to know, I don't know if others are curious, how does one progress from starting to meditate or being curious about it to getting to, I'm going to go silent for 2 months? Because I imagine like it's quite the progression. There's probably different frames of mind at different periods. So maybe some context there would be interesting.
Certainly. Thanks, Paul. So for me, I've came up in meditation through what I call the kind of the app generation. A lot of people are familiar with the apps like Headspace or Waking Up by Sam Harris, or Calm. My app of choice when I started meditating was 10% Happier. And it starts off with just a 7-day introduction. It goes from like a 5-minute meditation all the way up to, I think you get up to 10 or 15 minutes in that 7-day period. So you're right, Paul, that going from starting with 5 minutes of meditation to 8 hours a day for 42 days straight, it's quite the progression. So one of the first kind of watershed moments for me was I was being led in meditation by Joseph Goldstein, and he was just doing a very simple breath meditation. And I really listened to the instructions, and rather, at that moment, I wasn't really lost in my own conceptions of what I was doing and stuff. And I was just like, I was very open and just applied myself to the instructions. And it was just about feeling the breath. And all of a sudden I noticed that every time I took an in-breath through my nose, I felt like stinging in my sinuses. And it was pretty unpleasant. And I was like, for 28 years, I've lived breathing through my nose, feeling this stinging sensation. Never once have I turned my awareness towards it. And that was definitely a watershed moment, because that kicked off some curiosity in me. Like, what else is going on inside of my body that I'm not paying attention to? So that was when I really hit the ground running with my meditation practice and got really into it. Now, at that point, I was on the first of my selective retirements. I'm on my second one now. And so I went on a motorcycle trip. And while I was on the motorcycle trip, I had a pretty profound experience while I was riding through the prairies in South Dakota. I had gone through, to set the context, there was a heat wave that was sweeping across the United States. It was about 110 degrees everywhere that I wanted to ride. So one day I was trying to get to the Badlands, and one day I saw that it was about 86, it was going to be 86 degrees there 2 days from then, and I was in Minnesota. So I had to take off and just start riding. And I rode through 2.5 hours of a rainstorm, 2.5 hours of 110-degree heat after the rainstorm, then about an hour of just amazing winds that felt like a linebacker was hitting you. There were crosswinds across the highway that I was on. My bike was swerving. I had to keep driving. The next day, as I rode across the prairies, I felt this deep awareness settle. Riding a motorcycle brings about a significant amount of awareness and attention to the details of your experience anyways, but this one was beyond that which I had ever experienced. And I just looked around and I realized that all of the farmland that I was looking at had been native land at some point, and that all of the people who had come up there, their entire lives, their culture, their civilizations had arisen and passed away, and not under fortunate circumstances either, as most civilizations don't pass away under fortunate circumstances. And rather than being, it's a very disturbing thing to think about, but rather than being disturbed by it, I kind of investigated the experience and thought about how all of our experiences like that, it all arises and passes away. And I felt a really profound sense of peace settle into me with that thought, rather than feeling as if I was responsible for making everything stay the same. I kind of gave myself over to the changing nature of reality. And so that was another watershed moment for me, where when I came back from my motorcycle trip, I wanted to investigate the philosophy of meditation. What could lead to an insight like this? And so I started with Dan Harris's book, 10% Happier, just because I didn't know where else to start. And then I moved on to Joseph Goldstein's book, Mindfulness. And Irv and I did Irv, who was on this call, I don't know if he is anymore, I don't think so. We did a book study around that. And so that kind of set the stage for it. And then the rest was kind of just a regular progression of finding a Sangha, continuing to practice, going on my first retreats, and then just realizing, like, this is something, I've seen the benefits of it. I really am curious what it would be like to do a long retreat. And so when the opportunity arose, I just seized it. Yeah. I realized that answer was probably pretty long. We still have 19 minutes. And so I do want to talk about, I want to talk about the retreat itself. So one of the main questions that people have is, did I have any idea about the coronavirus and the retreat? And I didn't at that point. So the way that the retreat was structured was there was 1 month with one set of meditators and teachers, and then another month with another set. And when the month was over and we switched to the other set of teachers and meditators, one of the teachers kind of said in one of the opening talks, like, for those of you who have been in here for a month, just so you know about the coronavirus situation, people in the United States have started dying. And I was like, why would you tell us that, right? We've been secluded and out here for a month. It was pretty, and you've lowered your guard in trying to open up to your own experience, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. So when your guard is down and somebody lets you know that, and you've also been practicing your loving kindness and compassion meditations, it's pretty jarring. And so then things in the second month never really settled down. Typically after the first week, people settle into the meditation. They're much quieter. They're able to sit in the hall for the entire meditation period, which is generally between 45 minutes and an hour. And that never happened. People were moving around. Everybody was getting up and stuff. It was very disruptive. And I just thought these people are just a different set of people. You know, some of them are a little bit wild, and I'm just going to have to deal with it. Then in the second week of the new group, on like Thursday of the second week, all of a sudden signs went up all over the campus, and it said mandatory meeting at 4:15 p.m. and this was at like 11 a.m. So we had a good 4 hours where our brains could just run wild with the possibilities of why we were having this mandatory meeting. We came in, and in true like retreat form, rather than off the top just telling us what the topic was, they said, let's sit together for a minute. And we sat together for about 10 to 15 minutes, just stewing in the not knowing of what the experience was. And then they said, this is about the coronavirus. So they told us Italy had been locked down, that things were taking off in ways that nobody really expected. The NBA had shut down all games. That's when I really knew that it was extremely serious. Not a whole country locking down, but the NBA canceling. And then the March Madness was canceled as well. So they gave us the option on that day of whether or not we wanted to stay or go. I was committed to staying, and so I kind of just continued on about my day the way that I normally would on the retreat. The next morning at 8:15 a.m., they announced that they were canceling the retreat, and that the retreat, so that was on a Friday. They said the retreat's going to end on Sunday. So at that point, I went and got my phone, and I called some people to try and figure out what I was going to do, because I'm on a motorcycle out here, and I was planning on just kind of living off the back of the motorcycle, camping out, going to monasteries, and that wasn't going to work out anymore, I realized. So thankfully, my friend's parents have taken me in, and I am staying with them. And but the weather, right at the end of the retreat, the weather changed. It had been beautiful for all 6 weeks, and all of a sudden it got rainy. So I had to stay on for a little bit, and it was pretty interesting, the cognitive dissonance that was going on during those last days. between the fact that there was a global pandemic unfolding outside the grounds, and yet I was still on this retreat, and it was absolutely peaceful. Everyone had left, except for just a few retreatants who they allowed to stay over. And yeah, it was incredible. So I want to make sure that I open it up to questions. Is there anybody have any burning questions right now?
This is Stuart. Thanks for sharing all that. It's really interesting to be able to be inside of you as you were going through that and feel what you were feeling. And I'm imagining you where you were sitting and where you were walking. And what did you do for food once? Did they close the kitchen at the end as well when you stayed on? But my biggest question was, before you knew about the coronavirus, I'd be interested to know what it meant to be in like week 3 and week 4. And did your quiet deepen dramatically? Did you find yourself going somewhere that you had never gone in your own practice because of the extended period of time?
Yeah.
Thanks.
So to answer the food question, they provided us with food, thankfully. The other question, so I had that same question, Stuart, before I went on retreat. I wondered, because in my experience on like week-long or 9-day retreats, towards the end, I had achieved like a deep level of quiet in the mind, and I was able to really stay with my experience moment by moment. And I wondered if that would just continue to deepen or whether it'd be kind of a roller coaster effect. I can tell you during week 3 and week 4, I was relatively quiet, but also at that point, it was pretty blasé for me. So not much was happening in my practice. And I was going to my teachers and saying, I don't know if I did the right thing staying for 2 months. I'm kind of just sitting there. I don't really feel like I'm going anywhere. You know, I felt like I had taken some steps back in terms of my mindfulness, because no experience was arising that was really drawing my attention. And they just encouraged me to continue sitting. They said, you know, stand up, do whatever you need to do in order to keep the energy going and just keep going to the sit. So I did. And so it was a little bit of a roller coaster in terms of mindfulness and calm. Then when the switch happened, that bit of agitation coming from the change took me to a place that, yes, I've never really been in my practice. So there was a lot of difficult memories coming up from my childhood, things of that nature. And but I had the continuity of the practice that was supporting me. The agitation was kind of like the grain of sand that gets into the oyster that produces the pearl. So if things had just kept going and been like perfectly peaceful, I don't know what would have happened. But that bit of agitation led to some pretty big breakthroughs in my practice, and also a period where I had to persevere quite a bit. It was pretty difficult. Painful memories that manifested themselves as painful physical sensations as well. But through all of it, like, the teachers were great. For those of you who haven't been on retreat, about every 3 days on the long retreat, I would meet with my teacher for 15 minutes and talk about my practice. That was the only talking that we did during the retreat. So hope that answers your question. Are there other questions?
Travis, thank you for sharing your story. I especially love the story that you told about the ant. You know, you talked about your history earlier with a bed, with some type of insect on you, and then you brought it into your present moment. I loved listening to that, and I'm sure that's a story I will remember forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. Thank you so much. I think we maybe have time for one more question, and then I'm just going to provide some reflections on kind of what I've learned having come out of retreat into this pandemic, and kind of the space that I was in as I came out of the retreat really informed how I'm viewing this, and I hope that some of the reflections will be beneficial. So we have time for one more question. Is there anybody?
Well, if no one else is going to ask, I'm curious how your parents felt not being in touch with you during all that time and knowing that the virus was growing and not being able to speak to you.
Okay. Well, I'm going to take my video off, and Mom, Dad, do you want to answer that?
This is Janet Mann, Travis's mom. When he had decided to go into this meditation that I knew was going to be 2 months long, especially since my diagnosis of cancer, Travis and I spoke about 3 to 4 times a week. We probably became closer than we ever had when he was young. So to think of him going on a 2-month retreat where I wouldn't have those conversations it was tough for me, no doubt about it. But then once the virus really picked up steam and was going everywhere, including, growing in the US, I worried about his state of mind. And I just tried to put myself in a place that if I were in a place where I had absolutely no idea this was growing and going on around us, how would I feel when all of a sudden one day they tell you life as you knew it has stopped? And so I worried about what effect it would have on him. I knew that he had other plans he wanted to do in California, and none of those were going to happen because of, the situation we were living in. So I was worried about his state of mind, but I also knew, having meditated with Travis and how his practice has grown through the years, that if anyone could handle a situation like this in a calm manner, it would be Travis. So I'm glad that he's handled it the way he has.
Thanks, Mom. Dad, you got anything to add?
I just thought that my initial reaction is what better place to be than a retreat house? It's almost a complete quarantine without thinking through the fact that there's outside support teams that keep the retreat house going. And then I just, I was hoping he'd get to stay in there for turn it into a 3-month retreat, a 3-month quarantine. But then, knowing his Travis's resourcefulness, and I knew, I knew he'd be fine. He's resourceful, and he'd take it step by step and keep himself safe. Once he, I guess we were spoon-fed all along. We were conditioned incrementally for the coronavirus. Yeah, there's 20 cases and this and that, and I know maybe we should do this type of thing. And then he had to get the shock treatment on social distancing and hygiene. Well, not that there's a lack of hygiene, but the increased awareness of staying away from people, and just like I said, shock therapy, like getting an ice water bath after getting out of a nice cool, warm shower. So, and I think, going forward, listening to the group of people, and I admire your practices. I think that your mindfulness is a great tool going forward because everything is so uncertain right now. So I
That
look
actually
forward
dovetails.
to the next podcast.
Yeah, that actually dovetails perfectly with my reflections on this. So you go into a retreat and you're sorry, one second, I'm on mute. You go into a retreat and I'm gonna spotlight my video. Taking a breath, starting over. You go into a retreat and within the tradition that I practice in of Vipassana meditation, there's 3 insights that are kind of held up. And those are the insights of impermanence or anicca, the insight of suffering or the instability or the unsatisfactoriness of the ultimate unsatisfactoriness of all conditioned experience, which is the insight of dukkha, and the impersonality of all conditioned experience, that really, like, our experience is not us, right? This coronavirus is not something that is against us as like personal people. So you go into the retreat wanting to, like, you're kind of hoping on some level, you know, even though you're letting go of expectations and things, you're hoping that you're going to have some sort of insight. And all the Dharma talks, you know, every night you have an hour-long talk where they talk about something that's kind of related to one of these topics: impermanence, dukkha, and the impersonalness of it all. And when I got this news, and the subsequent days after we got this news, there was no Dharma talk, no forced meditation that I could have ever possibly done that would have taught me the lessons that I've learned about just kind of the nature, the way that things are, had I not had this experience. So it really, reflecting on the coronavirus, like, all of the things that we thought were fixed, like our way of life, our health, the people that are around us, everything. I mean, the way that we work, all of that gets obliterated with this coronavirus. None of that is certain anymore. We recognize the impermanence of every single bit of it. And then the fact that conditioned experience is prone to periods of suffering. When this impermanence takes over, if we're clinging to anything, if we're holding on to the old way of life and trying to force that against this natural disaster that doesn't care about your way of life, it doesn't care about your feelings, right? It just acts according to its own nature. It's not like it's an evil thing necessarily. It's not out to destroy your well-being per se, right? I don't think that a protein shell filled with RNA necessarily has evil intentions. This is just the way that things are. And so it's not something worth clinging to, and it's impersonal. So it's, like I said, it's not out to get you. It's just out there, right? So not taking it personally, not feeling as if my life was disrupted by this. That's kind of the reflections that I've had. So we reached our hour. I thank everybody for joining. It was great to talk to you all, and thank you for your questions. And I'll post the recording, and you can look back on it or share it with your friends. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Travis. Stay safe out there.
I will. Thanks.
Thanks, Travis.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you. Good to see you, Nehemiah.
What's going on, Travis? I love it.
Me too.
Later. We'll talk.
Yep,
We'll
talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, man.